Hello, my name is David Martinez. I'm joined today by Phil Goertzen. Today, we're going to talk about teaching English abroad and how it can lead you to some really interesting countries. Phil is joining me today to talk about TESOL, to talk about teaching English to speakers of other languages. This is a great way to travel, to see the world. I often talk to students about this opportunity. Thank you so much for being here with me today. You've traveled, you've been around the world. It's my understanding that you got your start with JET. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a long time ago, a long
Yeah.
time
What
ago.
is JET? Tell me.
So it stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And I think the strategy was to hire a whole bunch of native speakers of English and then give them almost no training, throw them into a classroom and hope for the best.
But this is years ago. Now there's
The,
probably some more
I
training
think
that
that
takes place.
I don't know that it's changed that much, but you may think, oh, that's not a successful strategy for changing the English level of an entire country. But if you do it over 30, 40 years, what it does is it forces all the Japanese teachers of English to use English every single day. And so the level actually does go up, but it's kind of in a Japanese way. It's a long game way.
Yeah. I am intrigued by this. I tell students about it, even though I don't have that much experience with it, with JET. But it is an easier way. If you're in the United States, you're not, maybe you haven't traveled a whole lot. It's nice to go to a country with some sort of job or some sort of stability, somebody who's going to at least welcome you, pick you up at the airport, maybe, or help you navigate some of the difficulties that you might encounter, like where are you going to live, and that sort of thing. Was that your experience?
It was a great way of getting to know a different country. I'm Canadian, and so it was very different from Canada. I was in my 20s, if I remember correctly, in my 20s, and very little overseas experience. And then, but they did take really good care of us. Like there was no room for things to go sideways because it was organized really, really well. And so
How did you hear of JET?
some recruiter came to the university where I was studying, and they still do. They still recruit at universities, and they're looking for really good, nice people. They're looking for nice people who will represent their country well. I think there's kind of a diplomatic side to it as well.
Were you thinking about teaching English abroad at this point, or was it
I'd
out
studied
of the
Japanese at university, so I
okay.
I needed a reason to go to Japan, and that was great.
Okay, so you
And
weren't thinking about a career necessarily
no,
in TESOL.
I thought I we were married in 1988, and 2 weeks later we went to
Oh,
Japan,
wow.
and we both thought it would just be fun.
Okay.
And that's, I think, we've talked about, a lot about this, but how people get started in this profession, you end up with, even those who end up with PhDs probably started as, what we call now like a backpack English teacher, which is an English teacher who is just ready to travel anywhere. And this is a good way of getting you there. And some it's stuck and they got the credentials, but not everyone starts with the credentials and then goes. They just go and then they get the credentials.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. That was what happened to me as well.
Yeah.
But often when I talk to English teachers around the world, same thing. It was a way, for some, it's a way to pay off debt. For others, it's a way to see the world. And then you realize how much fun it is and how enjoyable it is and what a great experience it is. And so then you come back, you get the credentials, and then you get maybe better paying jobs, you get more stable jobs. Yeah, for me, I first heard about it. I think I was playing euchre, which is a card game that's only played in the Midwest. If you know what euchre is, congrats. I was playing online, and ended up playing with this English teacher in South Korea. And so we started chatting, and he was telling me about his experience. That was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And then it stuck with me in the back of my mind. Oh, this would be amazing. This would be a really cool experience. And fast forward several years, a master's degree where I did a kind of a subspecialization in linguistics with a focus on TESOL, English issues in second language acquisition, and so forth. And then I got a certificate through Oxford seminars, and finally I ended up with a short stint in Spain, but then I ended up in Taiwan teaching English. It's just falling in love with it, with the friendships that you make, the fellow teachers. In Taiwan, you have a co-teacher. Was that part of the JET program, or you by yourself in front of the
No,
students?
they never let you go by yourself. So in fact, that was the beauty of that program, is that it puts you in with the Japanese English teacher, and then a lot of your friendships were with those teachers, and in the teacher's room, and the office people and that kind of stuff. And it was really the whole package. Like it wasn't just like the kind of wrong impression I got of teaching in that program was that teaching was entertainment because they would laugh at anything, like literally anything. Like you don't normally get I don't normally get compared to movie stars, but in Japan, I started believing some of those things, and it's not necessarily good for you. Back in that time, we were pretty rare, as foreigners around the country, and so, but English teaching is not just entertainment, but I did fall in love with that, being able to carry a class, being able to work with another teacher, the whole educational, the ethos around education is very much let's use education as a means of diplomacy and creating better understanding. I really bought into that whole time,
Nice. Yeah,
big
yeah.
time. But
But
yeah.
you're doing lesson plans and you are implementing these
Yeah, those
plans.
are like the necessary details that weren't so necessary at that time. But yeah, now I teach people to use lesson plans.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at the time, you didn't know how to do that, or did somebody teach
I
you?
think I just kind of used the same shtick over and over and over, but
Yeah,
yeah, and just modified the jokes because a lot of the time, like sometimes you would go into a school and see each class one time.
right.
Like there's so few of us,
Mm,
as North Americans in Japan, that there weren't enough that you could teach an entire term or semester and
okay.
follow a curriculum. So that's the other mistake I made, thinking that was teaching.
Yeah.
Basically have the same talk and use it for 3 years straight with modified jokes. That's what I thought teaching was until I went to Scotland and went to a real university, learned how to actually teach.
This is
So
where your master's degree
yeah,
is,
master's
right?
in yeah that ended up being in Scotland,
And
Edinburgh.
what did you get your master's in?
Master's was applied linguistics,
Applied linguistics. Okay.
and then yeah,
Were you thinking TESOL the whole time? You're thinking like, how can I teach English, or were you just
it was really shallow. I was thinking, how can I go back to Japan and make even more money?
okay?
That's honestly what I was thinking. And somewhere in there, we had a couple of kids in Scotland. We went back to Japan. This is now the '90s, early '90s, and somewhere I was thinking, this is so easy. And I think I kind of heard, people talk about hearing God's voice. I don't think I heard an audible voice, but it was the idea of, this is so easy. Is this really what you're going to do? Like, I know, like I'm a Christian. I believe that God is involved in our lives, and I really know that He got me through the PhD because I know it didn't quite deserve it. So it kind of showed up in front of me as an unexpected option. So I did it, and then I used it to create the maximum gain for myself
Okay.
in Japan, which at the time you could make a lot of money in universities, doing very little work. But I
Mm.
remember standing in a class thinking to myself, I should probably do something more meaningful with this than what I'm doing. Even though teaching Japanese kids was great, but it wasn't really much of a challenge.
Did
But
you go from your PhD? Did you go? You went back to Japan, and then were you teaching at university?
yeah, I taught at university. Yeah,
University. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, at a private university.
And since then, you've traveled all over the world. You've gone to other places to teach English as well. So how do you make that transition from Japan to somewhere else?
Yeah, that kind of doubt that was sown in my mind that it was doubt that I was noble. I think I think it was more a confirmation that I was kind of shallow. That's what the doubt was. But it was like, go find a place to actually stretch this a little bit. And so I ended up back in Canada at a private university near Vancouver and ended up directing a TESOL program, TESOL teaching as a second language program, a certificate program,
Mm.
which was also an undergraduate minor at the same time. And so we must have seen hundreds and hundreds of people come through that program over the years that I was there. And a lot of those were being sent to foreign countries, or not being sent, but sending themselves to foreign countries. And I always liked living overseas. And yeah, somewhere around that time, I got involved with, yeah, something in North Korea, but maybe that's another story. But you could ask me about that too.
Can I ask about North Korea?
Yeah, you can ask me. Sure. Yeah, I've got good things
You
to say.
end up but I want to back up a little bit though, because you're directing this TESOL certificate slash minor. It's because I'm in a similar role. It's kind of hard to send students to other countries because, at least in my experience, I want to go, and here my role is a little bit reversed in the sense that I get to talk to students about strategies and ways to get abroad, and yet
Yeah.
I get to stay here, or I have to stay here depending on how you view it. Was that hard?
It was really, my wife and I were gone from North America for 10 years, so kind of from early 20s to early 30s. And coming back to Canada was the hardest in cross-cultural transition I ever had.
So
And
reverse culture shock kind of
yeah,
thing.
and I was so mad at my own culture, like
Yeah.
in the kind of immature way you are in your late 20s, and it was just seeing everything that was wrong.
Yeah.
And I remember one time actually sitting in church, quite judgmental of all my fellow churchgoers. And the little thought came through my head, that was, if you can put up with all the stuff you put up with overseas, how come you can't put up with your own countrymen?
Right.
And it was like a pivotal moment thinking I need to be nicer. Well, I was nice enough. I just wasn't thinking nice thoughts.
Yeah, it's not the great space to
But
be in
yeah,
if
and
you're
it's
in a
not a
worship
good,
service.
that kind of anger is not a good space to be in. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I was looking for opportunities to go overseas and do something even for the short term. The
Yeah.
minute I got home, I was absolutely addicted to living overseas and doing things
Yeah,
overseas.
I hear that often as well. In my case, it's a similar experience. It's hard not to be judgmental sometimes when you've seen other ways of doing things, and then you get really, not only do you get frustrated with the way things are done, but you get frustrated how nobody else seems to see, or they're unable to see how there's a different way of doing things. In my case, I listened to a sermon years ago where the pastor asked us, is this displeasing to God? So I think that's the distinction I often try to make when I get into these spaces of like this cynical, what kind of like, music, particularly, what kind of songs are these? And then I hear this voice of, is this displeasing to God or is it displeasing to you?
Yeah, that's
you
a
know,
really good
and
question.
that
Yeah.
distinction often helps me to get out of my own head and my high horse. Is that the term? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, there's a good reason why we're told not to be judgmental
Right.
because it gets turned back on us. As soon as it's hard, you can't even judge people for being judgmental because that's judgmental. It's better to sit there and understand than it is to sit there and judge.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So you're directing this diesel, and then somehow you end up in North Korea. How do you? So you.
it was another accident. I met somebody who was on the board of the Canada side of the organization I work for now, and I just met him in a meeting, and then he gave me a call one day and said, "Do you want to go with us? We're trying to see if
Do you want to go with us to North
yeah,
Korea?
yeah,
So it's
like
like you want
yeah."
to, hey, like hey, let's go to Starbucks and grab a coffee, and
It
then
it
let's go
was
to North
it was
Korea.
not more complicated than that. It was, I'm going in like 3 weeks with, can you ask your wife, can you want to, because we want kind of the academic with us, right? They were board members, business people. And I said, "Well, sure." And I was just thinking that's another kind of travel, credit for me,
Huh.
like another notch in my travel gun. And
Yeah,
I
and
could
to be
tell
clear, this
yeah.
is the country of North Korea. It's not like the DMZ. You're not going like you're actually going into the country of North
Yeah,
Korea.
yeah. Sometimes I have people correct me and tell me that's not where I went, but it is where I went.
Huh.
And to my great surprise, I found out that they were very welcoming
Hmm.
and very eager to participate and cooperate with us in what we had to offer. And I think I was sitting in the airport leaving after the first 3 days, kind of saw all their universities and schools and got tours of everything and heard about a lot of things that they wanted and we really couldn't provide any of the things that they said they wanted. They were material things.
Hmm.
And
What kind of things were they
oh, they
asking for?
needed they needed technology and computers
Okay.
for language labs and that kind of stuff. And we don't do that at all. We just provide people.
Okay.
And so, but as we were leaving, I had a thought in my head. It's like, well, I wouldn't mind coming back here for a couple of weeks and do some teacher training, teacher development. So I suggested to the North Korean colleague I was with, and I said, "Would you ever want us to come back and do 2 weeks of teacher development with your English teachers?" So the Korean system itself has an English program, like very robust English program. And his eyes lit up, and we literally sketched it out on a napkin in the cafeteria of the airport
A plan or
in
some kind
Pyongyang.
of a
Well, it's like
comeback.
plan, yeah, like, okay, I'll bring 4 teachers. Okay, we'll send 60. Oh, I know the school we could use. Yeah, we could probably get this approved, and yeah, I can probably, get this approved, and so on. And it took a couple of years of back and forth. In the middle, there was a thing everyone's forgotten about, which was SARS,
Hmm.
which was like pre-COVID,
Well, we've
COVID.
forgotten about it because something else happened.
Something bigger maybe happened than that. And but it was like a precursor. And so, things in Asia shut down that summer. And so we'd planned to go back that summer. So we only got back there in 2004 then
Okay.
and got the warmest welcome ever.
Okay.
And we had no clue. Like, we had no clue what we were getting into. They had no clue what they were getting to with us, but everybody was eager. And I just found the teaching to be some of the most satisfying teaching I'd ever done. Because are there any questions? And like 30 hands would go up.
Wow.
And they were all fellow teachers and all struggling with the same things that every other English teacher struggles with,
Hmm.
from classroom management to curriculum they found difficult using and
Hmm.
and how to keep your class engaged. And it was just regular stuff. And we just did our thing, like what we'd been doing everywhere else, just a little simpler English.
Hmm.
And they invited us back many, many times.
What was the overall level of English if you were to compare it to a different country? I mean,
It depended. Sometimes your lower level of English is kind of mitigated by enthusiasm,
okay.
and that they had enthusiasm. They had enthusiasm and willingness to participate, and anything we tried, they did. So, in some other countries, you might say, okay, get into pairs or groups, and you might have to spend 20 minutes explaining it or forcing them to do it somehow, right? You know what I'm talking about,
Yes, I
right? They
do.
just don't want to do it. Maybe North Americans are kind of that way sometimes too. So, but in the schools we were in, those teachers said, okay, we want to use this in our class, so we're going to participate. Like they're very kind of meta
So the kind
aware.
of teaching you're teaching the teachers of English
In that situation,
in
we
this
were teaching
situation.
just they were middle school teachers. It's a while ago now. It's like 20 years ago.
Hmm.
But yeah, we were teaching middle school teachers and university professors of
Okay.
English.
And you're not just teaching them theory. You're like these are the kinds of activities we would do in our class, and then you pretend you're students kind of situation. So they're kind of having to go back and be students again.
Yeah, well, they had two needs. They definitely wanted to hear what was going on in the rest of the English teaching world. So we taught them what we knew, and then they also wanted to improve their own English. So we kind of split it between morning and afternoon. I mean, maybe your listeners will be bored by our curriculum details,
No,
but
I'm interested. I have a lot of questions
I'm
too
sure
about.
you're interested.
I have,
But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, as we're talking about TESOL, it's interesting to get into the what we actually do because I often hear students if I want to travel, I want to see the world, and my go-to answer is teaching English is a great way to see the world, and
yeah, it is.
and it's
Yeah,
a career, and it's a lot of times when you're traveling, even as a tourist, it's hard to get into the culture and really have that kind of genuine, authentic experience that we all want, right? But if you're a teacher, you are part of a school with a co-teacher, with administrative assistants. That's been my experience. So it's a great way to not only travel and see the world, but also get to know people. But then the response I get sometimes is, well, it's kind of seen as not, it's not very exotic. It's like, there's like this idea in their minds and in the imaginary that I'm not going to do that. Or in some cases, I had one friend who he was just too good. I'm too good for that. Like if I'm gonna get a job abroad, it's going to be, I don't know, some kind of business organization, that kind of thing. So I think it's good to get into the nitty gritty to talk about these opportunities that you had to meet teachers in North Korea. I mean, what an opportunity! I often tell students, traveling is a great way uh, to learn how wrong I am about a country. Because we all have these ideas. I have ideas about North Korea. I've never been to the country. Where do these ideas come from?
yeah.
So you must have had these same ideas about North Korea, and then now you're in the country, and I'm sure you get questions. What was it like? Were you afraid? Were you scared? Those kinds of questions, right? So no, maybe they're
Yeah.
bored, but maybe I don't know. But these are
No,
great.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot in what you just said. And I remember a student I was teaching in Canada who said to me at the end of the semester, she says, really, this is kind of a boring field. Like, she's just been a semester with me. Like, how do you feel as her instructor? But then she qualified. She said, but you got really good stories.
Hmm.
And I think to me, it's not actually a boring field. Like helping someone improve their language and understanding their language. To me, if you have that kind of mindset, it's a really interesting field. Maybe it's not geopolitics or I don't know medicine or something, but at the same time, where it gets you is nobody can top my stories.
Hmm.
So and I think that's for someone thinking about the field, it's one thing to just go and be a native speaker or a good English speaker and teach English because that's your qualification. And it's another thing to do that really, really well.
Right.
And so it's doing it well. That's the piece that makes the stories more interesting.
Hmm.
In the first case, the stories will be interesting because they'll all be about how dumb you were,
Right.
right?
The mistakes that you
The
make early
mistakes you
on.
made or
Yeah.
like the misunderstandings, which they're good stories. They're fine. Wouldn't
Right.
discourage anybody from doing that. But once you start, if you can do it well and really help them in their system, then you realize you'll never see the impact, the total impact, but you do know that there's teachers having a more satisfying experience teaching in the north of Korea
Hmm.
because they're using more fun and engaging tools. And to me, that's incredibly satisfying. But just the stories alone I have of being there
Yeah.
are enough for me to make this like the best job ever. Like I can't imagine a better job, and I can't imagine doing the job I have in a different way than what I've ended up doing.
Right.
I'm
Right.
getting near the end of my I don't know the last decade or 2 decades of my career. Let's say I don't know.
You got plenty of time. Then you go back to
Let's
North
just say
Korea
I
several
hope so.
times.
Yeah, I
So,
want to go back.
but you
Yeah.
go to North Korea for what, 2 to 3 weeks at a time? or a
Yeah,
month?
well, yeah, now I'm supervising the groups that go.
Okay.
And so, we have,
And you're in charge of the kind of the quality control. Like we're gonna send good English teachers. The material is gonna
for
be
sure.
good.
Yeah, that is actually my job in the whole organization to make sure that we're sending good English teachers. But yeah,
Yeah, and that's so important
yeah,
because I think you do end up in this world in TESOL, and you know this. We've seen pretty horrendous teachers, ones that don't take it seriously, that are there to to kind of pass the time, right,
yeah.
and enjoy and party and so forth. And I always try to instill a sense of deep responsibility.
It's a responsibility.
Yeah. So it's
It
it's
is.
great to hear. It's great to hear that you take that seriously.
The responsibility is related to our faith.
Right.
Like it's connected. It's connected. Doing a good job is connected to what we say we believe
Yeah.
because it's part of honesty. Honestly,
I
honestly.
I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Yeah, there's a great book called Addicted to Mediocrity. I think it's called by Frankie Schaefer, and he goes after Christians, and particularly in the art world, because he's talking about how it used to be that Christians were the best artists because they were Christians, and this was kind of a deep value. And nowadays, it's Christians are just good for the sake of
Kitsch.
being.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear you to uphold those standards. I
Yeah. We
love it.
should not be the kitsch equivalent
Right.
as English teachers. We should be the very best we can. It sounds cliche to say that, but
Yeah.
we should be the best we can be. But a
Yeah.
lot of that is just, part of it is of being a good professional in this particular field is being committed to people as people.
Right.
And so that means you're listening to them, what their problems actually are, and you can't solve all their problems, but listening goes a long way.
Yeah, and it's interpersonal, it's relational. That's what I like.
Yeah.
I love talking to people, meeting people. It's one of my favorite things. And so to get to do that in an international context, it just is so much the better. But I want to move away from North Korea, but I do have to ask you, what's your go-to answer when people, because you must get this question all the time, like, weren't you scared? Were you afraid? Right? Do you have a go-to answer of like, what was it like?
Yeah, I've got the 5 second, 10 minute,
Give me
2 hour
the
answer, long form
27
podcast.
second answer.
I've never been afraid there. I've never, apart from, some traffic near misses or something. But
Right.
no,
Which would happen in other countries as well.
it
I've
more
had-
often happens
Yeah.
more often in other countries. Yeah, including
Yeah.
my own.
Uh-huh.
But I have, like, I can't tell you that we've never had any problems or misunderstandings. I won't go on and on about the number of times we've had misunderstandings. I'm a Canadian, I think, different than my American neighbors.
Sure.
Never mind my, North Korean neighbors across the Pacific. Um, but I think both sides have been committed to resolution whenever we've had difficulties, and I would say that they've always been open to resolution with problems with us,
Hmm.
and that to me is someone you can work with, and they've said that just as openly as I just said it to you, and so on the one hand, I know why things can be difficult, and on the other hand, I wonder why they're so difficult when you've got people who are, if you show them just a minute's kindness and a willingness to listen, why you can't solve some of these problems. But I'm just an English teacher,
Yeah,
kind of a
that's
boring job,
fantastic. Yeah. With a boring
So-
and in a boring field that somehow lands you in these pretty amazing places.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
all over the world, not just North Korea. Right, you've taught it. Where else have you taught?
Well, yeah, countries in South, Central Asia, I guess you would say. Yeah, like Iraq and Afghanistan, places like that. Also,
Wow, you picked
termed to be-
you picked these like classic places
I've
to go
given
to.
you like all
People talk
the-
about Southeast Asia. They talk about Thailand, or they talk about in some cases South America. You're talking about Iraq. Where else? Where else did you say?
and Afghanistan, yeah,
Afghanistan.
yeah. But that's just so all these places. I think the common thread is if you do a good job and you are respectful. It doesn't mean everything's always going to go your way or you're always going to be, quote, safe. Like people ask, is it safe where you go? Well, no, if you want safety, I think I'm quoting someone else who told me the same story. Like when we asked him if it was safe, no, it's not actually safe where you're going. If you want safety, go to like Switzerland, but they don't actually want you there. So where we go, we're really well appreciated, and you don't have to pander to be liked. You just have to do a good job. So I don't feel like I've ever, pandered to a political belief that I don't believe in, or had to say things or do things I felt uncomfortable with, or actually, I wouldn't say I've probably had to do things I felt uncomfortable with, but things that are morally questionable
Right.
to get what we're doing, we'd never have to do that. Just do a good job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree. In my experience teaching English in Spain and Taiwan and South Korea, I was in South Korea for a summer,
yeah,
just south of you.
yeah.
Maybe around the same time. I was there in 2007, I think, or
I'm sure I
2000,
was there sometime in
2008. Yeah.
2007. Yeah.
Yeah, and likewise, I think go with respect, with a desire to do a good job, and it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. Some of our ideas of what it's like to be, I don't know, a teacher, or even just things that we take for granted. Here in the United States, you might not encounter that, but that's why you travel. I often tell students or anybody who wants to travel, you shouldn't travel to find the exact same thing you have here. You should go to experience something different, right? And in that sense, it might feel weird at times, but you're going to be okay, probably.
Yeah. We always tell people who's starting with us, like, you're allowed to ask why for 3 months.
Okay,
And
and after
after
and
that,
after that,
like, stop asking why. Like, you make up your own answer and see if it works and stop asking why. Like, and stop trying to say, like, our first inclination is that it's better where we come from. We have no clue what's better. We have no clue what
right.
works where, really.
It can happen the other way
But
around though, because sometimes you can travel and you can realize really quickly that it's better there, and then you get into
there are
this,
tons of things that are better. Like
and,
hospitality in the Middle East, they've nailed it.
really,
They've nailed it. Yeah. Like the dinners you get invited to are unbelievable.
mm,
And the laughs you have together,
yeah,
they're just really good. I try to copy that actually in my backyard at home when we have people over. It's like, how would they do this in the Middle East? Like that, I often
yeah,
think that way. And then, you have way more food and more laughs actually too.
yeah,
Probably more likely to sit on the floor and
yeah.
relax.
Well, again, it's interpersonal. For me, it's
Yeah.
the people that you meet. Every time you travel, you're gonna come back telling stories about the people that you meet way more than the sites that you see and all that. We've talked a little bit about the idea around the exotic. It's not a very exotic job, and we've given some responses to that. Do you have a go-to answer with this? For this question, like, oh, I don't want to be an English teacher. I'm not gonna do that. What would you say to somebody who says that?
Yeah. I think you have to ask what it is you want out of your career and your life. And I'm not saying this is the best thing answer to that question. But it's not for those necessarily who want fame or not fortune for sure. There's no fortune in it. Maybe a few
There
people.
can be some
Well,
money
maybe
to
some
be
of the,
made.
the authors of the textbooks that you use, or not that you use because you're training teachers, but
Yeah.
the ones that become popular across,
Uh-huh.
across the whole planet.
Wait, authors of books are making a lot of money of these like teaching English?
Yeah, the interchange series and stuff like that. I think those guys are doing pretty good. But I don't actually know. Maybe they're not. But in any case, not fame and fortune.
Right.
And it is, but there is I'm not naturally an extrovert either. Like I don't necessarily want kudos from the wider masses. I think if my family think it's cool and a few friends think it's kind of interesting, if you think it's
I
okay,
think it's great.
then I'm more or less satisfied with the fame part of things.
I miss it. I was
So
talking to somebody, a professor here at Fox now, who he also taught English abroad. I think he was in Slovenia or Czech Republic or
yeah,
Czech,
sounds great.
and recently ran into him and we're talking about teaching English, and I made some comment about like, yeah, I kind of miss it. I wish we could go back. And he said the same thing. He's like, I miss it. Let's do it. Let's go. And there is, and I hear that often. People who have taught English abroad or spend a year or 2 years or more, I miss it. I really do miss it. And sometimes, when I'm having a rough day here at the office, I'll look at what are some English teaching jobs that I could just jump into right now,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think I say in the same way I talk about what else you can do, through teaching English, and we've touched on it some. Meeting people, those encounters are in my view priceless. But the mechanics, so the follow up question, once you talk them away from this, like it's not a very exotic job, and they're kind of on board, then you get into the mechanics. What is it like to be in a classroom in a teaching? What are some what has been what some experiences you've had in the actual classroom? You've taught. I've been in a classroom with 40 students in Taiwan, for instance, and that was really hard. Primarily, my classes have been smaller, like 4 to 5 students. What are some experiences you've
Yeah, I've
had?
had the same. I've had,
Right.
for just because we couldn't help it, like we've had 75 in a class
Oh wow.
at times, but
So what do you do with 75? How do you possibly
Yeah, I
teach?
probably don't do it again is my answer. But they got exposure
Yeah,
to ideas and a fluent speaker of English for that they otherwise wouldn't have got.
right.
But at the same time, yeah, we aim for 12 to 15, and that's who you really that's what you want.
Yeah. Do you do it so a lot of small
So
groups and a lot of like pair up, that kind of thing?
in our classes, oh
Yeah,
for sure,
like
yeah.
75 students, I would imagine. My when I heard you say that number, I would think right away, maybe you're presenting something or you're talking about some grammar structure, what you want them to walk away from, but then it's immediately get into small groups and speak and talk. I mean, I'm curious to
Yeah,
know.
except that it was a room built for 50, but yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but no, I mean, sometimes you just do things. I mean, I've given you the extreme example, but
Right, right.
we just started an online division. And so you say online, people go, no, it's like COVID university online. It's not like we do everything live.
You got to talk me off the ledge on that one
But
because
yeah,
my initial reaction is no.
everyone's is. But what we do is we use everything from breakout rooms to online surveys to pair work, group work, all the exact same things you do. And we create a curriculum just for that particular mode of teaching.
Okay.
And so then you do have happy people, like you do have people having fun and enjoying their teaching, and they do come back.
I might have to see this in
So
person.
the problem is you got to get them into the class because they don't want to, like they don't.
Right.
But there are places where you just can't go,
Yeah.
And so
Right. Or parts of the world, you mean? Like
yeah,
certain parts.
like we were in Mongolia, for example. We've had a team in Mongolia for decades, but not in every province. And then we started online um, contract with their government, and we were suddenly in every province online.
Okay.
So we would never, we couldn't find enough people, like actual humans, to go to all those provinces and provide that program. There's no way it would never happen.
Yeah.
Like we can't recruit that many people.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, they're super happy. Like we had people sitting in what is the Mongolian house called? A yurt? Is that right?
Could be. I don't know. I've never been to Mongolia.
It's like those round tents with this straight walls.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they, that's what's in the background of the Zoom call.
Okay.
And maybe they're outside and there's like animals walking behind them and stuff too.
So, but as an English teacher, where am I then? I'm in the United States.
I'm
teaching.
in like Seattle or something.
Yeah. See, if you tell me, I want to go. Send me to Mongolia. I want to go to Mongolia.
Well, there's also teachers who used to live overseas and they can't because they want to raise their kids here, or
Okay.
mom and dad are sick or something. Those people also are eager to teach in that mode because it's that or nothing.
Right.
So you match up the that or nothings in Mongolia with the that or nothing teachers, and everybody's happy. If you force them because there's a disease going around the world, that's a different story. If everybody wants to be there, it can be a pretty good mode.
Yeah, that's fair. This is interesting to me. I love talking about teaching abroad. I understand that again, there's some students or some people who view the field from afar, but a lot of times those people have not been a part of the field. There are people who like from the outside, or they've heard stories, and it also the other side of it is people who are, who think about their personality. And say I'm not outgoing enough, or I'm not. And you mentioned that you're not
I was just going to
outgoing.
say that. I was just going to, because the answer to the question, okay, it's not very exotic. Well, that's fine because I don't actually need exotic people. Like a lot of teachers, really fine teachers, are introverts.
Yeah, and imagine
The
all the stuff that you
introvert,
can do because it's not an exotic job,
right?
right?
So they actually don't want to be known by the entire world, that they're not aggressive ladder climbers. They want to have 30, 20, 15, 20, 30 people in a class who really appreciate the work that they're doing. It's the perfect field for that.
Yeah,
And a lot of all I ever said in all the teacher training I ever did was you don't have to be an extrovert, but you don't need to know how to act like one for about 90 minutes at a time. And so
yeah,
that's not a hard thing to do. It tires you out.
it is exhausting.
But it
Yeah,
actually is really satisfying even for an introvert.
it is, and it's rewarding as
Yeah,
well.
it's really
It can be
yeah.
exhausting, and there is one of the things I like about teaching too is there is an ability to start over. You don't often get this in other careers, in other jobs. You think about a class that you teach, and you don't. I often say you don't learn from experience. You learn from reflecting on your experience, and
Yeah.
it's the same with teaching. You need to reflect on your teaching. And I always, every time I finish a class, even today when I finished my course, walking away thinking, what went wrong? What did I do? What happened? There was a mishap with one of the students, and what happened? How can I fix that? How can I correct that? And so it's not often that you get that chance. That second chance in other careers. Whereas with teaching, it's kind of expected that you're going to make some mistakes early on. And I remember when I was teaching early on, I've made mistakes where I was being observed by my, the supervisor, right, who's kind of like taking you under her wing, and I made this massive mistake in front of a class, and she was just sitting in the back with her arms crossed, and I knew what I'd done.
Mm.
I basically had invented an answer to a question that was asked because I'm the teacher. I'm supposed to know the answer. This is early on in mistakes that you make, And all the students kind of filed out, and she just, she's shaking her head, and she goes, "Don't ever do that again." Right. So, but I
Don't
had that
make stuff
chance.
up.
It wasn't like I was fired on the spot, and you never get a chance to be a teacher. And I've never done that again. I've never invented an answer to my knowledge. Yeah, I don't. I think I learned from that mistake. But yeah, it's not personality. You don't have to be outgoing. I happen to be a little bit more outgoing, so my classes, I had to reel it in a little bit. I came to a realization that I felt like my personality was driving the class more than the material, and so I had this kind of like crisis where I was like, are they learning anything, or are they just having fun in my class? And you had to like make some adjustments and some changes in that regard.
I had a supervisor in Scotland who was watching my class. I was early in my career, so she was assessing me. And she said, "Well, at the end of it, how did you think it went?" And I said, "I think they had fun." And she said, "Ah, what's fun got to do with it?" And
There can be an element to
but
fun,
she was a
right?
fun teacher actually. But she was trying to pull me back from that as my criteria for success. And you do need content.
Yeah,
Like you need to do things that have outcomes in your class, not just, and laughter is just not the main outcome.
right,
But it is fun to have fun, and you
right.
should.
Yeah,
But
for
the,
sure.
the other part is that your students are incredibly forgiving. Like if you are warm and honest, give them actual feedback. You don't lie to them, but you give them good feedback delivered in a gentle way, then they will forgive when you didn't know something.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, there are aspects to the mechanics that we can get into, and or also you can just start teaching and figure out what exactly you want to do, because there's an array of teaching. You can do after school programs, you can do high school, middle school, you can do university, you can do the kind of in company teaching that I did for years in in Spain, where I was going to the Bank of Spain and Repsol and other companies, and sometimes the company is paying for these classes,
Yeah.
and in some cases the students are pulling their own resources and saying, I'm going to take my lunch break and I'm going to pay for this. And so I had one class with 15 students because they were all pulling their resources together, and that made it cheaper for them. In other cases, the Bank of Spain, the bank was subsidizing the English classes, so it was smaller classes, 4 or 5 students. And so, yeah, you can get in and kind of figure out what works best for your personality. Also, money is a consideration if you want to make more money, and so forth. And again, it's such a great way to travel and see the world. There's a novel by Arthur Phillips years ago called Prague. I think it's just called Prague, even though they end up in Budapest at the beginning. It's a great book to read if you're thinking about traveling. It might help you out with this kind of wanderlust, a way of, yeah, just like traveling and figuring things out along the way, because you know uh, everybody's experience is different as well. And traveling, it's we have ideas of what it is, but it can be very lonely. It can be some of the most lonely, some of the most like soul wrenching, or I don't know what the word is, but like you're walking around this city. Maybe you just had a kind of a weird encounter. You don't know what to do with it. You don't have the mechanisms in place that you would normally have to support you, or in some cases to ignore it. But it can be, on the flip side of that, the reflecting on that experience, there can be so much growth, and yeah, and just an amazing experience in my view. I don't know if that's been your experience as well as you've traveled around the world.
I find airplanes to be a little bit lonely, but we
Yes.
always have people on the other end. There's always teams on the other end that we're going to meet.
Mm.
So that's all. I find that fun for sure. But yeah,
But it can be
but being
lonely.
away from your family, like your kids are younger than mine. So, but
Yes.
when I travel when my kids were smaller, and yeah, you feel it.
Yeah.
Maybe they feel it more than you do. But
Yeah. But again, my hope is always that students or people, anybody listening to this, that you'll be encouraged to take the plunge, travel, go see the world. Go teach English. Why not? Give it a shot. It could be something you do for a summer, something you do for a year, or maybe it turns into a career.
mm.
Yeah. Okay, it's time to spin the globe. Let's see where we land.
My finger.
Your finger, go for it. Where did we land?
We did land in China.
China. I have okay, so this is a tricky one for me because I lived in Taiwan for 2 years.
Yeah, so
So
that's part of China.
So that's the question that I never answer, and I'm certainly not going to answer that question on this podcast. Is it a country with a one China, Hong Kong, Macau, that sort of thing? But you have been. So I never went to mainland China. I never made it there, and I really wanted to. It just happened that we didn't get a chance to go. You've spent time in China though. Where in China?
I think I've probably been all over for very short periods of time. Never actually lived there, but traveled through many times.
Also teaching English or teacher training.
Our teachers work there, so I've visited them
Okay.
in their university placements there and teams there many
Okay.
times. The Chinese government has been very, very helpful with us, and we've enjoyed a long relationship with them over the years, and especially at the university level.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've been to interesting parts of China, way up on the Tibetan plateau and
Nice.
like that too. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's one of the countries, even though I've never been on to mainland China or taught there, I did look into numerous universities, and that is, I think, a pretty good. It could be a good first job for a lot of people thinking about doing TESOL or getting into TESOL. I think that would be from the outside. You could say yes or no. I don't know. You're the expert here.
I would agree 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like the Chinese people to work with they're very eager learners, and so I mean I can't speak to every single one,
Right. Yeah.
but
generally speaking,
speaking, they're appreciative that you're there. They work hard, studious. So and they sound like cliches, but it's a good country. The food is fantastic.
I was gonna say the food is amazing. Yeah, and so many different corners. It's kind of like the U.S. in the sense that it's very different from one end to the next, right? We're talking about, I don't know, the major cities like Beijing or Shanghai, or you compare that to maybe some of the smaller cities or more rural areas. Harbin, have you been to Harbin, China?
We have people there. Yeah.
So Harbin, I wanted to live there. I applied for a couple of jobs in Harbin years ago, and they're famous for their ice sculptures.
Yeah.
And my wife was a little bit nervous about my desire because I wanted to live in Siberia. It was one of my dreams was to live in Siberia for a year. And in my mind, Harbin became kind of a compromise. Can we go live in Harbin for a couple of years?
Because I want to just fly to Calgary and get it out of your system.
But Harbin, so tell me about Harbin. I would.
I actually have not been there.
Oh, you haven't been to
Harbin?
Okay. But you have people working.
Yeah. And I think.
Are you looking for teachers?
Always looking for teachers. So yeah, we should talk after the podcast. Sounds like you're a prime candidate.
I still think about. There are a lot of things that I didn't do that I will always be kind of regrets. I have too many of them, so there's no way I could have done them all.
You have a fair bit of life in front of you. Still,
I do. But as you mentioned earlier, I do have small children now. But I think we could all go to Harbin. I would love that.
Yeah. We've had large families in China and every country where we work. Yeah. Including North Korea.
Well, to our listeners, I've never been to Harbin, but you should look into it and you should go live in Harbin, China. Well, thank you so much. This has been I've really enjoyed hearing more about your stories in North Korea. TESOL, teaching English abroad. It's been great to delve deep into this. It's near and dear to my heart because I experienced it. I did it. And I always encourage students, especially like as a gap year or that may or may not turn into a career, but it's just a great way to see the world, to experience people, and to get to know people in different parts of the world. So it's fantastic. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
This video podcast is a production of George Fox Digital. To find more material like this, you can subscribe to George Fox Talks on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Our team really appreciates your feedback in the form of likes, comments, and reviews, and we'd really love to hear what you think. To sign up for our weekly email list and to keep up to date with the latest episodes and publications, you can check us out on the web at georgefox.edu/talks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.